Good morning, folks. Real pleasure to have Michael Pinckney today. Michael and I were colleagues at Gartner. I absolutely adore people who have the guts to try a second career. And in Michael's case, he went not just from technology to another technology field, he went to baking cookies. Michael, it's wonderful to be with you again. Tell us a little bit about the journey. My God, to go from a B2B to a completely B2C environment, deal with families, consumers, must be completely different. Tell us about the journey and give us a quick tour of your facility. I wish Zoom had a scratch and sniff feature. I bet it smells wonderful. But give us a quick tour and tell us about the journey.
Thanks, Vinnie. It's great to see you again as well. It's been a while. Yeah, so I'm Michael Pinckney, Cookie Monster and founder of Pinckney Cookie Cafe, aka LoveTheseCookies.com. And we are a gourmet cookie company. We ship anywhere in the country. We have some great gift items on our website as well. And what makes us special is that it really has been a journey all about the cookies. Our cookies are all natural. Number one ingredient is dark Belgian chocolate with the cookies that have chocolate. My favorite's the Bing Bling, which is a chocolatey dough chocolate chip, coconut, and diced dried Bing cherries. And we have other great flavors like our flagship, which is a brown butter, brown sugar, bourbon spice. So that's the one you want to try.
Oh my God! What's the bourbon?
I use Woodinville Whiskey Co., which is a local company that is about 7 years old or so, and they've had just explosive growth and were bought by a larger company. It's a really good bourbon.
You're a bad man. You're going to corrupt us all.
I've been accused of that before. I have. But we also have miracle cookies, and those are vegan and gluten-free and delicious, which of course is a miracle. And they have been a huge boon to our business as well. So I've had an interesting journey. It started decades ago when I was baking at my mother's knee, and we had a rule at home: no junk food. But you could have whatever you want as long as you help. So my brothers and I grew up in the kitchen, and there were always fresh baked cookies and coffee cake and apple pie and West Indian fruit cake and just all kinds of wonderful stuff. We ate like kings. And as a young man in New York City working for IBM, I decided to make the best chocolate chip cookies in the world. It was just a fun adventure. There was no business plan. It was just, have great cookies when I wanted them. I would take them to work. My friends would taste them, and a week, 3 weeks, a month later, when I wanted to bake again, I would make them with the changes they'd asked for. And of course, people love that. Fast forward a few decades and I have kids, and they love to be taste testers. And I take them to my kids' school auction, and a year later, someone comes up to me in the parking lot and says, "Hey, Michael, are you bringing your cookies to the auction this year?" And I'm thinking, people remember these a year later unprompted? They must be special. So that's the genesis of the company. I was working for Microsoft, had some health issues, sleep disorders, which were tough to get sorted out, and was, a difficult journey getting there. And Microsoft treated me wonderfully, but it was time to just do something else. And I had this idea of doing multi-level marketing with college students. And instead of like doing a startup and raising venture capital and that whole deal, you get 30 kids on campuses who are entrepreneurial and have 5 entrepreneurial friends. And before you know it, at every football game, kids are selling cookies. The dorms smell of cookies Friday night because cookies in the microwave. You ship them online and you have a little business. And that was the idea. I did the research, found out that really I needed to have 2 efforts, one for college students, one for everybody else, because the needs were so different. Doing college students only seemed way risky. Doing 2 efforts just wasn't done. Wasn't doable, sorry. And I ended up launching as just an online business, and inadvertently ended up in Whole Food stores, a number of local Whole Food stores, a number of other retailers. I was wholesaling too, but the business model just didn't work. It wasn't what I'd planned in the first place. It was kind of a make it work kind of thing. And I had just very, very limited resources. And so without a lot of money for marketing, it just wasn't going to work, particularly because I'm selling such a good cookie. People don't think of a good cookie as something you buy. You get that from grandma's kitchen. a Whole Foods can sell an adequate cookie for less than it costs me just ingredient costs. So for me to actually make money and for them to have a margin, it just wasn't workable. And I ended up building a farmer's market business. The goal all along had to be a national brand, and farmers markets aren't the way to get there, but it was a way to make my business, thrive. And so the strategy was to become a fully online business, make that the lion's share of the business instead of the farmers markets. Last year, I got to the point where the farmers markets were going gangbusters, but I couldn't make progress on the online business because the hiring environment was so terrible that I never had enough help and just couldn't do anything but make cookies and go to farmers markets. And that brings us up to the time of the pandemic, and things changed dramatically.
Well, give us a quick tour of your facility, then we'll talk about the pandemic, because I'm sure.
Yeah, sure.
Some amazing drawings to share about. Yeah.
I lease space from a caterer, and this area here is my space, and then there's shared spaces such as the ovens and the walk-in refrigerator and the dish pit, etc. But this is where we actually make the cookies. And I don't have a lot of length on this cord, but you could probably see pretty well the mixer. That's an 80-quart Hobart mixer. If you look up there, you can kind of see the, well, you can't see it too well, but there's a big 80-quart bowl. We actually use a 60-quart bowl with an attachment. Down there, you can see different ingredients. And so we put the cookies together over there. And then on the other side, there's a gluten-free section where we do the same thing. This is the freezer, one of the two freezers we have with the inventory. You see the different types of cookies in the Cambros. And then when I'm going to put this down for just a second. When we ship the cookies, we individually wrap them. And so, let's see, they look like this.
Oh, wow.
And by individually wrapping them, they stay fresh much longer. And we just finished a project to get bags. So the actual product will, look that much more elegant when we ship it out.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for giving us that tour.
Oh, my pleasure.
And I noticed you didn't show us a bourbon, so.
Oh, the empty bottles. Yeah, the full bottles are a little further away.
So, Michael, we've been seeing amazing heroics and what I call acrobatics in business, right? All kinds of auto companies jumping in to make ventilators, healthcare heroics, last mile delivery, amazing volumes, banks processing 4 million PPP loans. I mean, these are like unheard of volumes and innovations and so on. I bet your business, moving especially, like you said, from a farmer's market to an online only kind of thing. I mean, you must have had all kinds of demand and supply challenges. Tell us about the heroics you had to do.
Yeah, it was challenging. The biggest problem was just day one, deciding what to do. I learned about the pandemic because we are 2 miles that way from the nursing home that was ground zero in Washington, where they reported the first cases, and 1 mile that way from the hospital where the people who died. And so I knew from the get-go that I was right in the absolute center of it, the most dangerous place in the United States as far as the pandemic went. So the first question was just whether to stay open. I was able to stay open because as a food business, I was a essential business. One of my, two employees are either high risk or very, very high risk. And I'm high risk because I'm not a young man anymore. And so the first question was just, do we stay open and can we make it work? We decided to do that, but I decided not to do farmers markets because I thought that was just too risky a proposition. And as it turned out, the farmers markets closed in a week anyway. So in a sense, it was a blessing in disguise because I did have the personnel that I didn't have last year, and I certainly have the time to work on the online business. We came up with a good idea to get it launched, which was I did an email to all of my Square marketing customers. I use Square, that little swipe device for orders at credit card orders at farmers markets, and you can send email to a subset of those people. And so the first campaign, the subject was something like, "We can't wait for the farmers markets to reopen, ... And then when you opened the email, it says, "But you can still get your favorite cookies." We had a 71% open rate, which is just, unheard of, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a really high click-through rate. And of course, that created a lot of social media buzz, and that created a lot of new opportunities. And so things went from 0 to way more than anything we'd done, an order of magnitude more than anything we'd ever done overnight. And that created problems in terms of how we did things around here. I had to kind of reorient my thinking about, how do we manage inventory, and how do we change the process because we have more people working, and how do we change the online system. One of the things that's a challenge for any entrepreneur is to go from where you do everything to you delegate. And when you have to do that quickly, it becomes more of an issue. So prior to that, I made all the cookies. People helped with all aspects of it. People scooped them, but in terms of running the machine, no one had run the machine and actually made the cookies other than me. It became time to teach someone else to do that. That was a big step. Sounds like a little thing, but in when it's a small business and it's it's a huge thing. So there were a lot of changes. We were lucky in that we didn't have too many supply issues. There were a few things that became short of supply, but I get my ingredients from a number of different sources at the beginning anyway. And so when one didn't have it, for the most part, I could get it from someone else. In one case, I did have to change something we did just a little bit. The sparkling sugar on the ginger molasses cookies, we can't get that anymore. Bob's Red Mill does not have it. The stores don't have it. So we have to use, kind of big grain organic sugar. But for the most part, the supply part has been fairly straightforward. Just having to plan more and wait.
Michael, that's great to hear. I interviewed Tom Ryan, who used to be a colleague at Gartner, about stresses on supply chains. And we were talking about everything from healthcare stresses to food chain stresses to manufacturing. So you've been fortunate, because some of the other supply chains, especially if you're dependent on China or meat packing plants and all that, have been dramatically affected. So,
but interestingly, on that stuff, on the point of things from China, the one thing that we did want to get, we currently hand seal the bags, with a sealer, and I wanted to get a machine to do it. And the machine that I wanted to get, and the one above it and below it and next to it in that line from the company I wanted to get it, all on back order for indeterminate amount of time.
Probably Logitech, which also makes the webcams that are back ordered. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I mean, like Logitech, right? Trying to get a webcam these days is near impossible. Or Dell laptops.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about demand, though, because I interviewed an executive at Costco last year who does their prepared foods division, right? So all the rotisserie chickens and the food courts and so on. And he was describing machine learning, because they're at their scale, machine learning for better demand forecasting. In your case, I understand you ended up with a backlog. How have you managed through your demand spike and supply constraints?
Yeah, that was the other thing that was really difficult, because it went up so much instantly, and there was no history to use to predict, and it changed dramatically because of the coronavirus situation and the specifics of my business. And so we had a huge spike, and then it dropped off a lot. Interesting thing about our business is that it's over 50% gifts. I mean, we assume they're gifts because the ship to is different than the bill to. And of course, a lot of them, there are gift cards. But a lot of people buy cookies for themselves. But what has always been popular is buying cookies for others. And in this situation of lockdowns, a lot of companies have been buying cookies for their employees who are stuck at home.
Michael, you're corrupting everybody.
Exactly. You gotta spread it out. A lot of people are buying cookies for friends and family, across the country. So the whole gifting aspect of it has accelerated great. And the cookies make great gifts, particularly when they're special cookies like these. I mean, our cookies truly are without peer in terms of broad marketplace. Also, vegan people, dairy-free people, gluten-free people, and particularly people who are some combination of those have an even harder time finding good cookies. And ours truly are delicious. And so they're incredibly popular, and they make great gifts as well too. So yeah, demand forecasting has been difficult. We couldn't meet demand for a long period of time. I was limited in how much I could hire because of the risk issues and the tight working environment you see here. I mean, we do wear masks, but masks help. They're not a complete answer. And so I did hire an additional person who was working kind of off hours, just because, we didn't want to introduce another person into the mix right here. But it made for not a very good job. And even though I was very upfront about the situation from the beginning, it didn't work out just because it wasn't fulfilling to the person. And then they were a college student looking to figure out what they were going to do long term, and the turmoil because of what was going on with school also contributed. So everything we do has an extra element of change to it because of the situation.
I cannot begin to appreciate the stress you've been under the last few months. So thank you for your service.
Oh, it's my pleasure. But the one thing I should mention that we did do that also had a huge impact, positive for the business, but difficult in terms of the stress and the management, is I was just feeling bad about the whole situation, spending too much time listening to stories on the radio about doom and gloom, and really wanted to do something. And so we decided to give $5 for every order of a dozen cookies or more to charities doing COVID-19 relief. And that, again, was very successful. We did a video, got a lot of shares on Facebook and Instagram. I happened to go to school with John Taffer from Bar Rescue, and he did an unboxing video, ordered cookies and did an unboxing video and posted that. And so that has been a huge thing. We've raised $12,000 for charities. And now we just did another video. We're switching our focus over to racial justice and are still giving $5 for every order of a dozen cookies or more, which is a huge amount of the margin, and it makes it less profitable. But hopefully over the long term, it gets us a lot of exposure and new customers.
Well, again, thank you for your service. Let's talk about the last item a little bit more, because, this started off as a health crisis, then it became a financial crisis, but it's morphed into a diversity, racial justice kind of crisis. Talk a little bit about Washington has been a little turbulent, I would think, or the Pacific Northwest seems to be a little turbulent. Talk a little bit about how you've coped with that. Obviously, you're doing charitable stuff, but how has it been for you? And, you've done a lot of work with charities. Describe a little bit about how they're coping and so on.
Yeah, so there definitely is a lot of turmoil in this area between the CHOP situation in Seattle and then a couple 100 miles south in Portland where things are even hotter. Vinnie, the interesting thing about change is that people, organizations, and societies change when they're ready. And our society has not been ready. Systemic racism is a real system. It wasn't, designed by one person, and there isn't a manual, but it is as impactful as if there was, a set of laws and a manual of how to do it. And we have never had an honest discussion in this country about racism. And so the only good news about the George Floyd situation and its aftermath is that we are finally beginning to have a conversation. In South Africa, when they ended up apartheid, they had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. so you could at least get on the table what had happened. Everybody could get on the same page as to where we are, and then there's a chance of moving forward. And as you can see, it's been a long road in South Africa, and they still have a long way to go. In this country, to this day, kids are still being taught lies in their textbooks. In this country, to this day, the vast majority of people have no concept of our country's history as it relates to racism, have no concept of what race even is, and have no concept of the experience that Black people have, and therefore we're not making a lot of progress. So the George Floyd situation has finally been the thing that's cracked open the door where people are willing to look in and say, wow, if that could happen, then clearly some of this other stuff I've been hearing about is for real, and I should pay attention. So I'm encouraged by the fact that we're starting to have a real conversation. It's been emotionally trying for me as well, because I've been the beneficiary of a guy getting brutally murdered in broad daylight in the street. We had a total outpouring of support. I was on several lists of Black-owned businesses, including Yelp and Seattle Met and Esquire and others. It really was heartwarming to see the support. And there's some other things that are still happening because of that. But it helps me. There's still a lot of other people who are in much worse shape who need a lot more help. And so the jury's out on where it's going to go from here.
Well, you mentioned South Africa. I had dinner with a South African executive, and he made the exact same point. He was like, till both sides sit down and acknowledge that there have been issues, we need to go through a cleansing process. We did in South Africa, we haven't in the US, to your point. But the good news is, I guess the good news is I've interviewed 2 Black executives, one at Salesforce, one just has his own fund, but technology executives. And both of them are just so positive about how change is happening in corporations. So I think the encouraging thing is at least corporate America is slightly ahead of society maybe. And maybe that's what you're pointing out. Person on the street is still not seeing it, but I see a lot of progress, at least in corporate America.
Mm-hmm.
Got to keep pushing forward. So thank you for your work, and thank you for sharing with the charities and so on. Let's switch a little bit to economics. I've been asking every executive, but I think I can predict your answer. I've been asking them, do you see a V recovery, a sharp recovery? You see a gradual U recovery? You see a W, spike up and down, inconsistent? Or do you see an L, which is it's going to be dead for a while? Now, based on what you've said, I would say you're a V. let me hear it from you.
Unfortunately, I'm not as optimistic on the big picture. I have a tiny company, so I'm not like I was in my analyst days reading about macroeconomics, every day and having conversations with people, et cetera. So I have a limited, view. So with that caveat,
don't apologize. There's plenty of analysts on Wall Street and elsewhere, and they don't know much more than you do. So don't apologize.
Well, I wasn't apologizing. I was just trying to provide some caveats, or to provide some boundaries. But anyway, at the beginning of this thing, there was a lot of talk about this recession, and back then it wasn't yet said to be a recession, but this situation, and then when it was clearly a recession, this recession is different than past recessions because there aren't broken economic fundamentals. It's not the Great Recession where you had this housing boom and you had a lot of fraud on Wall Street. It's not the Great Depression where you had events that led up to that. You had a fundamentally solid growing economy. It was at the end of a long period of growth, so the growth was going to slow down, but you had a solid growing economy, and it stopped. And so when you restart it, boom, it's gonna take off. Well, that's not true anymore. We have a hugely damaged economy. And that damage is continuing and will continue until we get the virus under control. The way we're going now, we're not getting the virus under the control. And unless there's a miracle in terms of a cure or a vaccine, sorry, in the very near term, it's going to be many months before the virus is under control. And so the economy can't fully open until that happens. And all of the bad things are piling up upon each other. I didn't put that very well. All the problems are piling up. We are starting now to have a eviction crisis. It doesn't look like Congress is going to pass more stimulus or do anything, and it's going to be harder and harder as we get closer to the election. So that's another 2 months. The banks are already starting to, take out big reserves because they see the chickens coming home to roost. The retail sector has been decimated, and while Amazon's getting a lot of that, they're not going to pick up all of it. The bars, the restaurants, the entertainment venues, a lot of them have or will close for good. So we have huge damage to the economy. So I think it's going to be a very long path back.
So Michael, let me give you some good news on the health side. Because I'm in Florida, and this is something I don't think the media is focused enough on. The positive cases, which are scary, in Florida, Texas, California, are now 50 to 75% more than New York. But if you look at ICU usage and fatalities per million, Florida is 1/3 or 1/4 of New York. California is 1/5, Texas is 1/4, right? So positives have gone up, but the fatalities are going down this way. Something has happened. I give credit to our healthcare system. They have done heroics, unbelievable heroics. They have learned so much from New York and Italy, how not to overuse ventilators, how to turn ordinary rooms into ICUs, a lot of small learnings, how to ship medical personnel across states, just a lot of heroics. And then the therapies are starting to kick in. There's an Israeli therapy Gilead makes that has been fairly effective in acute cases, convalescent plasma, and so on. So there's a lot of good news that I don't think we're hearing enough about. Do we need a vaccine? Absolutely. I think it'll bring a lot of confidence. But there are some fundamental things, positive things that, like you say, I think Main Street is going to take some time to recover. Wall Street is recovering. Main Street is going to take some time to recover. So your points are well taken, but it's not all bad news.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because it is not all bad news. And on the virus front, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of progress being made, and the question is just, when do we reach that inflection point where it is safe and people feel it's safe to go about kind of normal activities, because that's the gate that's required to be opened for the economy to really take off again.
So the question on behalf of other small businesses, clearly, like you say, initially you were traumatized, you probably still are, but you've kept positive and you've grown your business. What would you share with other small business owners?
Well, I think many businesses have been crafty or
creative.
People creative. There you go. Thank you. And that's the really most important thing, is to really take a step back, look at what you're doing, and look at what you can do differently. I was fortunate in having the ability to stay open and also having some sort of natural things to do, but it was creative to come up with the idea of a charity approach, and that largely came out of my own just mental health needs. But it still was a creative idea, and it's paid dividends. And so it's really a matter of sitting down and looking at, what are you doing? What are the core things that are making your business successful today? And then, you know, based on what's changed, what are some creative solutions to approach the problem differently? The other thing is to really be mindful of, you know, there are things going back that I wish I did differently because I wasn't thinking enough about or predicting enough about what would happen in the future. It's very easy to get caught up in all the craziness and the need to react and take your eye a little bit off the ball of what's going to be different 4 months from now, especially since it's so difficult to predict what's going to be different 4 months from now. But it doesn't make it any less important.
Michael, interestingly, I've found in talking to all these executives, the ones who have been reactive and agile have actually done much better in this pandemic, right? Because they've been able to pivot quickly, they've been able to jump into new markets, they've been able to just innovate because they were desperate, right? So agility has been, actually those who have overplanned may actually have been hurt more in this last few months. So
interesting.
I mean, I've heard unbelievable heroics from different people. And, you know, I've also been running a small, on Instagram, I've been posting pictures of people who have been working day after day. So my Amazon Prime person, my postal office person, the person who cuts my lawn, the person who does our pool, restaurants that have stayed open. You know, it's wonderful to see people who are so committed. So any final thoughts?
Well, it's been great chatting with you, Vinnie. We've covered a lot. There's nothing that's really coming to mind. I hope people stay safe and remember, if they want a wonderful gift, to visit lovethisecookies.com.
I will make sure and publicize this, and hopefully you'll get a few more gift card orders.
Cool. Thank you.